Elements of the past and the future combining to make something not quite as good as either. It's a line from a song from the really weird British comedy Mighty Boosh, and oddly enough, it's a line that somehow perfectly sums up how I see this thing. Now let me explain what I mean by that, because quoting an obscure British comedy is definitely a weird way for me to start a video, and might mislead you into thinking I think this is terrible, but it's not at all. What Ayaneo has done with the Flip DS is taken hold of some nostalgic elements from handheld Game Boys and Nintendos from years ago, and crowbarred them into this new category of device that's still to peak and become refined somewhere in the future. And the result, well, something that's not quite as good as either the old thing or the yet to come thing. I'm Cam Bunton from Pocket-lint, and I have some thoughts on it, as you can probably tell. So what is it exactly? The short answer is it's a handheld gaming PC that runs Windows, and Ayaneo is one of a handful of companies trying to take advantage of this new wave of gaming handhelds. It's a trend undoubtedly kicked off by the Steam Deck, before being joined by the likes of the Asus ROG Ally, the Lenovo Go, the MSI Claw, the Logitech G Cloud handheld, among others, all with different takes on giving you access to proper games but in a device that you can carry around with you. Ayaneo, at the time I made this video, already has 11 different models. 11! And it's a brand you've probably never even heard of. Now, this particular model, the Flip DS, is one of two in this range. The other is the Flip keyboard, which has a full QWERTY keypad. Now, anyone with any familiarity with the world of Nintendo handhelds won't need any help figuring out why this is called the Flip DS. It very much takes on that classic Nintendo DS form factor, with a flip-up screen and the smaller, less useful touch display panel built into the middle of the bottom section of the console. Software is still clearly in development, but you can use it to show current performance metrics of the hardware. It can be used for other functions too, like as a quick settings toggle screen or a quick launching app screen, or you can even have it display a second app, so you could, for instance, be watching a walkthrough or guide video on YouTube while trying to get through a tricky part of a game. With the right dual screen software and a bit of jiggery pokery, Ayaneo says you can even play dual screen games like you could on the Nintendo DS. Now, the screen can lock at a few different angles to suit different situations, so you can have it at 90 degrees, if you're a serial killer, or a more human 120 degrees, 150 or even 180 for those times where you're lying flat in your bed, and actually it holds itself here pretty well, as long as you don't shake it too hard while angrily trying to get past that impossible boss level. And the controls built into the base are pretty much everything you'd expect to find on a game controller, mimicking the buttons and controls that you'd find on an Xbox wireless controller. That includes the right and left shoulder and trigger buttons, the joystick and the D-pad. Unlike a proper controller though, these are relatively small controls. And because they need to fit underneath a shut display, they're recessed into the body of the Flip DS, and that itself means a few quirks to get used to. The joysticks, for instance, do take time to get accustomed to, especially if you're used to having protruding joysticks from your controller, your Nintendo Switch or Steam Deck. I find the best joystick feel comes when you can reach the tip of your thumb around the edges, but with this, you're sort of forced to just push them across the top. And the recess and the small size means the amount of movement is a little restricted. But also because they're forced into building such small mechanisms into tiny spaces with these consoles, there's also a sense that they're not quite as well made as the Xbox controller joysticks. And the same can be said of the triggers. You don't get the same resistance, and so trying to learn the sensitivity and precision for titles like Forza Horizons or any racing game, where you want gradual acceleration or braking, is definitely a learning curve. Now, for all of its drawbacks, the design does have serious appeal, and I'm not just talking about the cool retro styling delivering that nostalgic hit to those of us who remember the Nintendo DS fondly, although admittedly that is about 90% of the reason I wanted to check it out. There are two very real and objective benefits to this design. First, it's portable, so unlike the ROG Ally or the Steam Deck or any other slab, the fact that controls are built into the body under the display and that it can flip shut means it takes up very little space. It's about 180mm wide versus the nearly foot-long 298 measurement of the Steam Deck. It also means you can have your hands closer together when gaming at a more ergonomically friendly angle, not stretched apart like you would on the non-folding designs. The second benefit is that the display is tucked away and protected when you're carrying it around. It's shut against the body, and so it shouldn't really scratch or mark up because there's little opportunity for it to come into contact with any foreign objects. Now, of course, squeezing Windows into a small form factor has meant some interesting solutions from Ayaneo. when it comes to using and interacting with the interface. For instance, there's a square optical sensor near the power button, which you can use a bit like a mouse to move the cursor around the screen. The power button next to it has a fingerprint sensor built in for unlocking the device. You can also use the left joystick for moving the cursor if you want to. And the display is touchscreen, so you do have that option as well, but I found tiny little interactive elements in this version of Windows a little bit too fiddly to use this way. Now, being a PC, you get a lot of the typical wired and wireless flexibility you'd get from a laptop too, weirdly enough. For instance, there's Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, so if you want to connect a wireless mouse or keyboard or headphones or even a controller, you can. There are also two Type-C ports on the back. One's a USB 3.2 and the other is a USB 4, capable of driving 4 gigabits per second speeds and DisplayPort up to 4K at 144 Hz, alongside an Oculink port. So you can connect it to external monitors, docks, and even graphics cards if you want to superpower the performance and give it a more full PC-like feel. You also have a microSD card slot and a 3.5mm audio port, so there's lots of flexibility here. Plus, this particular unit has 64GB of RAM and a generous 2TB internal storage, so it's pretty beefy on the internal spec. And for those who want more specs, it's LPDDR5X RAM, M.2 PCIe UFS 4.0 storage, so yeah, it's pretty fast. And it's powered by the AMD Ryzen 7 8840U and Radeon 780M graphics. Now, as with anything this small, it's worth remembering it won't give you the same amount of power as a top-tier desktop PC. Just to see how it would cope, I ran it through Forza Horizon's benchmarking with ultra graphics settings enabled, and it typically would hit and stay between 25 and 28 frames per second. To its credit, it didn't really stutter or drop frames, but with a lower resolution and fewer complicated graphical elements to generate in a lower setting, the console can easily stick towards the higher ends of the capabilities of those games. So in the medium settings, it'll do 50 frames per second pretty comfortably, and at low, it'll do between 55 and 60. And because we're working with a 1080p 7-inch IPS display, it really doesn't need the graphics settings set all that high to make the most of it. Now, of course, this type of performance doesn't happen without any cooling on board, and there are fans. But as fans go, they're pretty quiet. Now, what I will say, however, is that because of the placement of the air intake holes on the underside of the console, it's best to avoid placing it directly onto a soft cushion or blanket or any other furnishing that'll block that airflow. Now, as much as Windows isn't really optimized yet for these small screens, it is what makes this device so compelling. Because unlike Steam Deck or Nintendo Switch, its PC software means you can download and install pretty much any game platform onto it, which means pretty much any game you want. So you're not just tied to Steam. You can use Xbox Game Pass, Epic's desktop launcher, and EA Play, among others. So the world really is your oyster here. I've genuinely loved diving into my old Steam library to play a bit of Portal 2, then switching across to Forza Horizon 5 on Game Pass, or any other title I've ever purchased, download, and own on PC. There is a bit of a problem though, and it's not a small one. Think of the Steam Deck and the Nintendo Switch in the US, and you're looking at spending between $300 and $500. And what you get in return is a really fun, convenient handheld console with access to lots of cool games. With the Ayaneo, you get access to more games from different platforms and a powerful, versatile hardware that you can expand to full desktop if you want to, but if you want to buy one, you're looking at an outlay of at least $700, and that's just for the keyboard version. And it's only pre-launch, early bird pricing on Indiegogo. It's not cheap at all. And it doesn't even have an OLED display. It's IPS LCD, which is fine, but lacks the contrast and brightness and the color richness of the OLED panel. So if there's one area I'd point to and say that needs to improve, that's it. As is the battery life, because it's only just okay. And that's one thing that these new PC handhelds all have in common. You put in a huge stint into a game without plugging it in at some point, and you'll get about 90 minutes to 3 hours of gaming, depending how demanding that title is and which settings you have the console set to. But you might just want to keep a battery pack nearby, because in the Flip DS's extreme settings, away from power playing Forza, I could literally watch 1% drop every minute, so I was looking at about 100 minutes of gameplay. So in the end, I do love the ambition of trying new things. Combining old school nostalgia with a modern product category is a great way to scratch that retro itch without sacrificing on AAA games. Now, would I spend my own money on this one at this price point for this particular model? Probably not. It ticks a lot of boxes though, and if you're happy putting up with a few of those compromises, you might just love it. I've been Cam. Let me know what you think of the Flip DS in the comments down below. If you did like this video, please do leave a thumbs up, subscribe and tap that notification bell, and I'll see you again in the next one. Bye for now.